Welcome in another edition of Orange and Blue today. Cecil Lammy, Andrew Mason. Mace, you are in Buffalo. It's game day, baby. Like the rare Orange and Blue today. That's actually the pregame show as well, kind of, Mace. But how's Buffalo, man?
It's blustery. It's chilly, not snowy. Blustery is kind of the thing. You've got some winds whipping around. We'll see what they're like closer to game time. I recall the last time we were here in the regular season in 2019, it was far windier than we're seeing today. And Brandon Allen, who you would describe in baseball terms as a little bit of a junk baller, not one who had a fastball, couldn't really throw into those winds. And it was a long day for the Broncos. Russell Wilson's got a little bit more zip on his fastball, and I think we'll be able to handle that a little bit better.
Right, not to derail the conversation, but wind is always worse than snow.
Thank you. And snow with no wind is actually ideal for offenses to operate. It actually puts the defense at a disadvantage,
right?
Because then you're worried about your feet and slipping on the ground when you're backpedaling. The old cliche, offense knows where they're going, right? Defense is reacting and thus doesn't quite know where they're going. And so if you're an offensive player and you see snowy day, no wind, that game could be a track meet for you, right? Mm-hmm. It's the wind that it's always the wind that matters. When the Broncos went to Kansas City 4 years ago, snowy day, it was a windy day. Caused some problems.
Right. And it's the win minus the D that matters for the Denver Broncos today. See that segue, Mace? And nice. If it is windy and if it's difficult to throw, run the ball. Hey, that sounds like a pretty good recipe, right? And it sounds like something we've seen the Broncos now finally do.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it the last couple of games. The test is if Buffalo jumps out to lead, do they stick with it or they go away from it? And that's where if you're down 13-3, 10-0, 14-0 in the second quarter and you stick with the run, that is what you're trying to get to, because that means you're trusting the game flow, you're trusting the opportunities you're going to have left over the course of those 60 minutes, and you're confident in what you are trying to do, right? I mean, a good example of this, Washington back in week 2 fell behind 21-3. What did they change? Nothing. They believed in their game plan. They believed in the balance that they were trying to establish. And lo and behold, bit by bit, Washington worked its way back in the game and pulled off a game that you look back on over the Broncos schedule. There are a couple of games where you're like, man, they should have had that one, right? How different the conversations would be if they could have beaten Washington or Las Vegas or the New York Jets. All three very winnable games that the Broncos dropped over the course of the first half of the season.
Right. So what does the offense look like if they have to get in toe-to-toe in a shootout against the Buffalo Bills? What does the offense look like if they can control this game? And then what does Russell Wilson look like? I wrote about it in Mile High Monday, Mace, and I compared it to the Josh Dobbs situation. Like Dobbs shows up, doesn't know what he's doing yet, even though he's like brilliant. And Russell Wilson's really smart as well, but he runs when he needs to. They're running the ball. Like they're doing simplified things, but they're looking good. And the Vikings fans are excited. Can Broncos fans get a little bit more of that from Russ today?
Hope so. Yeah, you hope so. I mean, what you need more of, and yes, you're able to beat Kansas City this way. Russell Wilson's probably going to have to be a bit more diverse in terms of the areas of the field in which he attacks, right? If he's basically only going middle of the field, left side, nothing intermediate, everything either at behind the line or back behind the line of scrimmage or deep, teams are going to figure that out. I mean, that's even a team as banged up as Buffalo that's, without defensive starters. I mean, they're not going to have Micah Hyde tonight. We know that, Tre'Davious White, Matt Milano, Quan Smith, they're all, they've got so many guys out for the season, right? I mean, so it is a battered defense, but it's still a defense that knows what it's doing. It's just some of the parts they have out there right now don't always get from A to B in the way that you want them to, right?
Right.
But schematically they know what they're doing. And it's funny, for all their hand-wringing over Buffalo's defense, you look at what they've done on a game-by-game basis, it's actually not bad. I mean, you're not looking at them the way you looked at the Broncos earlier this season when they were getting catastrophically, burned out there by Washington, Miami, by Chicago. That's not what Buffalo looks like, even with all the injuries they've had.
Well, the beautiful thing about this league, Mace, one of the beautiful things, and one of the things that make us love this game the way we love this game, which is a lot, it's a one-off thing. Mm-hmm. What worked against Kansas City, that worked, and you can take elements of that and use it moving forward, but you just can't rinse repeat and say, let's just throw everything at the line of scrimmage again. You've got to have that change up, and hopefully Russell Wilson and company have that in this passing game. Hopefully it's a Jerry Jeudy game or something. Like any sort of added help from the receivers or the quarterback as a passer is nothing but a bonus for this team.
Can be the running backs as well in the passing game, right?
Yep.
Let's see some more of Jaleel McLaughlin on screen pass here. Right.
Please.
Now, one interesting thing about Jaleel, and Sean Payton didn't specifically refer to Jaleel McLaughlin, but he might as well have been. There has been a trend the last few games where when Jaleel McLaughlin is on the field, there's about a 70 to 75% chance that he is going to be fed the ball either as a receiving target or on a handoff, right? And Peyton talked about how you review some things over the course of the bye week. You review tendencies. That's a tendency that you may have to watch for, but it can be to your advantage if you take it and turn it on its ear. Buffalo sees Jaleel McLaughlin on the field, they're going to think he's probably getting the ball. Mm-hmm. But if you flip that, you create openings elsewhere on the field. I mean, what if you go with a heavy package with two tight ends and you fake and you do either a play fake to Jaleel in one direction and you send one of the tight ends crossing in the opposite direction? That guy's going to have some space. And so even though the Broncos tight ends have been underproductive in the passing game, to say the least, that's to your advantage. And maybe you have an opportunity for a couple of sneak attack type of plays that catch a defense that has some significant personnel losses, has some younger guys in there playing and trying to grow. Maybe you can catch them off guard with a little bit of deception that gives Nate Adkins or Chris Manhurst or Adam Troutman that rare chance of a big play.
Yeah, and I was thinking like an Adkins, some sort of flow one way, Adkins sneaks out the other way. And as we're discussing this game, Mace, I'm like, the most surprising thing to me today would be is if the tight ends get involved. It'd be nice, but you got to scheme it.
Yeah, and it's not going to be something frequent, but it might be a situation where if you are using a tendency to your advantage, turning it on its ear to catch an opponent overplaying that, then you'll have some opportunities for maybe a couple of unexpected shots. I mean, it would be nice to get Adam Troutman more involved that way. You mentioned Nate Adkins, that he's another guy that could do that. And the thing is, that type of play we're talking about, it's nothing fancy. It's a bread and butter play. I mean, we've seen, that was a staple of West Coast offenses back in the 1980s. That was a great Bill Walsh play. Sam White used to run it as well, and he was a Walsh disciple. I mean, it's, there's nothing new under the sun in this sport at this point. I mean, let's be fair.
Right. It's not rocket science unless you're Josh Dobbs. I got Josh Dobbs on the brain.
A literal rocket scientist.
Yes.
Who's playing quarterback.
Yes. I'm like, what are you doing, Josh? Don't hurt that brain, that beautiful, wonderful brain. Anyway, you say bread and butter. I'll say toast and jam.
Okay.
Right?
By the way, not to look ahead past tonight, but can you imagine if Matt Henningsen of the Broncos gets a hit on Josh Dobbs next week when the Broncos take on the Vikings? That will be the highest IQ collision that I've ever seen in a football game.
Yeah.
The two guys that you look like, what are you doing?
Right.
You can do anything else in this world, but love of the game is real.
Yeah. Hey, love of the game.
With Matt, every time you talk with Matt, I mean, that he could, this guy could be changing the world. He's researching traumatic brain injuries, right? I mean,
yep.
But he loves playing football. And so here he is.
Yeah. And hey, we love that. We love talking about the Denver Broncos. And in this game against Buffalo, on the flip side of it, let's talk a little defense before we're out of here on today's show. A little pregame, Mace, got to get going to the stadium. So we're a little bit of a time constraint. But defensively, we'll talk about Diggs, but I wanted to pick your brain about Dalton Kincaid, a player that you and I appreciated in the draft. I think he was the best receiver in this draft, and he's a tight end. Now they're actually starting to use him. Josh Allen using him a little bit more. They still don't use James Cook. We'll save that. But Kincaid, I don't want to be, I don't know, hyperbolic when I say this, but did the Broncos learn a little box and one from that Kelsey thing? So it's like, okay, Kincaid is really good. He's not Kelsey, but because they did the box and one on Kelsey, does it give him a little more confidence? Like, hey, we can take on a guy like Kincaid and handle our business.
It does, but you modify it a bit to where you're talking about Pat Surtain on Stephon Diggs, who did have a back tweak in his practice last Friday, but he was good to go Saturday, so he's going to play. Certainly Pat Surtain on the outside gives you that luxury. And so maybe you're almost going, you'll remember triangle and two. That's another basketball thing. Maybe we're talking about a triangle and two here in terms of how you're handling Kincaid and Stephon Diggs, and then letting the rest take care of itself. I think that may be something that the Broncos need to think about here in this game.
Right. Something you think about. And then the main thing you think about is Josh Allen. And I put it in Mile High Monday, like they need to have Allen thinking pass more than run.
Yeah.
If he's running and he's dealing and he's extending plays, that's just tough on you, regardless of Josh Allen's natural talent as a runner. But if he's thinking pass, he's passing more and he's the opportunity to throw more interceptions, much like Jim Kelly and the K gun, except they don't run like they did with Thurman with the K gun. Jim Kelly threw a lot of interceptions. Josh Allen, he's going to throw a lot of interceptions. So have him thinking pass tonight.
And you have him thinking pass against a defense that's coming off its best takeaway game of the season, right? 4 takeaways from the defense, 5 overall if you count special teams. You just came off a contest in which you harassed Patrick Mahomes into some throws that he did not want to make. And you left him scrambling and you left him tethered. Now, Josh Allen, of course, is a different kind of scrambler. He's more direct. You know, Mahomes will try to keep plays live by doing the 360 spins out there, right? That's not Josh Allen's game. He's a different type of runner. He's a more direct runner. So I think we're not going to be talking about is if there are takeaways. They're not going to happen the same ways they did against Kansas City, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's, again, offensively, you can't take that same game plan. Defensively, you can't take that same game plan because these receivers are better. No offense to the Kansas City receivers who are just inexperienced. They're talented, but they're inexperienced. Buffalo, you got Stephon Diggs. He's one of the best in the game. You say counter that with Pat Surtain, then I'm going to bring up Gabe Davis, who's huge and fast, and I'm going to bring up Khalil Shakir, a guy you and I saw at the Senior Bowl, and I know you remember the play back in the end zone in that little dome, half thing where he like ripped the pass away in the end zone. I mean, and talked about it. I think didn't he get in a fight?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
like Khalil Shakir, one of the feistiest receivers out there. So again, the Bills' weapons collectively, they're better than Kansas City's weapons.
And I'll tell you, you might see a matchup of Shakir against Jaquan McMillan on the Broncos side. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Like if you're looking for a matchup where stuff might go down one-on-one because you've got a couple of high-energy players going at each other, that's something to keep your eye on right there. And then, of course, for Gabe Davis, probably going to be, the onus will be on Fabian Moreau a bit in that game. And Moreau's played well, but there are some challenges out there for the Broncos, no doubt. Like this is part of what's intriguing about this game is Kansas City, even though you've got Patrick Mahomes, who's the greatest quarterback walking the earth right now, beyond Travis Kelce, they don't have a lot of reliable targets. Well, here you have Josh Allen, who is a smidge below Patrick Mahomes, although he's actually having a pretty good season. I mean, he's made some mistakes here and there, but you step back, look at all the data of Josh Allen so far this year. He's right there at the peak of what he should be doing over the last 6 years. So, because you have to consider that, you have a greater challenge on the back end. So in some ways, I would say maybe even the task tonight against Josh Allen and company is much sterner for the Broncos defense than the one they had against Kansas City, because I feel like there's more to worry about tonight in
Yes.
this game. Stephon Diggs is on pace for career highs in everything. Okay.
Mhm.
A great career, and this so far appears to be peak Stephon Diggs. It has, I think, been a weakness for the Bills a little bit because he's doing so well. Josh Allen is locking in on him. Is this the game where they look at what went wrong last week in Cincinnati and say, okay, we've got to spread this around a little bit more? We already see the flashes from Dalton Kincaid, but let's get Shakir involved. Let's get Gabe Davis more involved. We know Gabe Davis can make plays, especially in the postseason, right? We know he can deliver in a high leverage game. And oh, by the way, even though this is not postseason, this is an incredibly high leverage game for Buffalo. It gets really tough for them schedule-wise after this. Both teams are looking at this as a game they absolutely have to have. The Broncos, because they're trying to dig out, and also because the next few weeks, all of a sudden, Minnesota looks good with Josh Dobbs. Cleveland has that defense. And, of course, they pulled off the last-second win yesterday in Baltimore. And then C.J. Stroud, I'm not sure we're talking MVP candidate the way Adam Schefter put it out there yesterday, but C.J. Stroud looks like he is on a collision course with being elite.
Yeah.
And being elite for a long time. This is so. And then you have the Chargers after that, and Chargers are inconsistent, no doubt, but you've never beaten the Chargers at SoFi Stadium. So, yeah.
Those are facts.
Exactly. Both teams got to have this game.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a lot of urgency out there in Orchard Park, on the field in Orchard Park tonight.
Well, it sounds odd because it's week 10, Mace, but playoffs are on the line. Mm-hmm. And not just for Buffalo, but like Denver. And I know they could maybe like have a mulligan and what. Mm-hmm. No, baby. No.
This is it.
Win.
This
win
is
as much as you can. And another quality win, Mace. We talked about that all last week. Like, you haven't done quality. You've gotten one. Okay. And that's nothing to take it away. It was awesome to beat the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. But it's like beating the Cowboys a couple years ago, whenever that was. It's like, okay, can you do it again, please?
Yep, I know you touched on it. I touched on it in my pregame piece at denversports.com. You can read it right now. I mean, it's about doing it again. I mean, we have seen, we'll just go back over the years against teams that were playoff bound. And look, that Chiefs team's going to the playoffs. So let's go back. 2019, you shut out the Titans, right? The Titans team that would make the AFC Championship game. And then you go out there 4 days later against Kansas City on Thursday night, you face plant. Later that year, you go down to Houston, take out the Texans. Huge game for Drew Lock in his second career start. We all remember it well. Go to Kansas City in the snow 7 days later, face plant in the white stuff. And then 2021, I'd say this is the best game the Broncos have played since Super Bowl 50. And that was the game in Dallas. Mm-hmm. They take a 30-0 lead on a really good Cowboys team. Dallas gets a couple window dressing touchdowns late. It's 30-16. Next week, Philadelphia comes in, and this is when Philadelphia was in the embryonic stages of what they were becoming. You go out there, boom, face plant.
Right.
How does this team show that it's different from the past Broncos teams? You go out there and you demonstrate that what happened against Kansas City wasn't a fluke, that you go out there 15 days later and do it again. By the way, Sean Payton's teams have won 10 of their last 13 games coming off the bye in the regular season. He talked about this a little while ago. He went out and sought the counsel of Andy Reid in the late 2000s because Sean Payton's Saints teams went 0-3 after the bye in his first 3 seasons. At that point, Andy Reid's teams had never lost a bye. A game after a bye. They won, I believe it was 13 in a row until 2012. And so he asked Andy Reid, hey, what do you do? And Andy's advice was simple. Said, I get him in on Monday after the game and then tell him to scram for a week. Players and coaches, everybody get away. No matter what happened before the bye, everybody get away. You can keep teams and coaches, you can keep players around until at least Wednesday in a bye week. Nope. He gets him in on Monday morning, has the meeting, said, okay, skedaddle, move on. Sean Payton started doing that. Lo and behold, Sean Payton's Saints team started doing really freaking well after the bye. And so he did that here. It's been successful more often than not. Also, a little quirk, teams coming off byes, playing on Monday night on the road have a winning record. So it's on Monday Night Football, road teams that aren't coming off buys, they're about 430 winning percentage. It's a 530 winning percentage when you are coming off a bye. It's interesting. So there are a couple of numbers to consider here that may play in the Broncos' hands.
I'm just happy today you've said smidge and skedaddle. 2 words that I think we could use more in our day-to-day, right?
How about skosh?
Just a skosh.
That's more of a Midwestern thing. Oh, just a skosh here and there.
Just a skosh. Just a skosh. You want some cream in your coffee? Just a skosh.
How many ounces is a skosh or a smidgen? Is there a difference between a smidgen and a... Oh, yeah. Skosh, smidgen, splash. A splash sounds like more than a smidgen or a skosh.
Yeah, don't be heavy-handed on the splash, though. The splash is still just a splash. It's like a 1 count, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Give me that 1 count.
No heavy pour. I've done like a guest bartending thing.
Have you been a mixologist?
For one night of my life, yes. And I learned all about give a heavy pour, Okay.
Yeah.
I got my, by the end of the night, I had my timing down pretty good.
Flipping the bottles around, right?
Oh yeah,
like Tom Cruise.
Like Tom Cruise in Cocktail. Yeah. Flip them in the air. I didn't do that. I would totally drop that. Like,
okay.
Beverage splashing all over. No, that ain't gonna happen.
That's not gonna happen. By the way, super quick before we're out of here, I did find footage of Matt Henningsen calculating how to get after Josh Dobbs. Here it is. That's right. That's what it would be like. Matt Henningsen meet Josh Dobbs. Lots of math.
Also, Josh Dobbs trying to elude Matt Henningsen, probably the same way. I mean,
right, exactly.
I think that's the reason why Josh Dobbs and Peyton Manning get along so well. Not just because they're both University of Tennessee alums, but because their brains are kind of on just a higher level than those of a lot of people. A lot of us mere mortals down here skedaddling around, skedaddle again, with our little brains.
Well, Mace, you got to get to the stadium. We're certainly going to have a good time tonight. I'll be doing the post-game show. You've got your post-game videos as well. So do we do predictions? I don't know. We rarely do the pre-game show. So I'm like, prediction time. That's the radio part in me. Like, it's prediction time on Orange and Blue.
I'll put a score out there on social media. I think it's going to be an upset. Not a blowout, but metaphorically speaking, we'll see the Broncos destroy that Buffalo table tonight.
I think it could be 35-10 Buffalo. It can't be 35-10 Denver, but I have the Broncos winning in this one, 27-24. So we'll look for your score on socials.
The path to this win, if the Broncos can get it, it's narrow, and it probably involves something happening late. But Mike McGlinchey, mentioned it earlier. It's about learning what this team can do when it has adversity, learning what this team can do when it's in the last 2 minutes. Back in September, something lousy happened. This team folded, right? Capitulated. I think it's a little different now. I think they've learned a couple of things. We actually saw it in the Green Bay game. Early in the season, if you have a situation like Green Bay had where they scored a couple of touchdowns and get back in, and get back in the lead, you're like, okay, this team's done, right? Instead, they rallied, pulled up their socks, pulled up their britches, marched downfield, got the game-winning field goal, right? I mean, that's something that this team wasn't capable of earlier in the season, and then they went and upset Kansas City the next week. So I think they're developing some resilience, and that'll help them tonight because at some point they're gonna hit the canvas. How do you get back up?
Yep. And if Buffalo overlooks them in the slightest, look out.
They're good enough to pull off the upset.
Well, and Buffalo's looking forward to all those tougher games.
Yeah, they are.
I'm just saying.
They also know the urgency here. They got to have this one. If Buffalo
if they beat Cincinnati,
I would say I think the Broncos definitely win this game. Buffalo had won last week. The urgency coming off that defeat, I think, changes things a bit. But you can't deny that Buffalo is a banged-up team, and that our old friend Von Miller, he isn't all the way back yet.
Right. We'll be watching with great interest.
Thank you, Senator Palpatine. Thank you.
Does that mean you're Anakin?
I guess that means I'm going to turn evil and just start. I'm gonna slaughter some Tusken Raiders here.
No, you needed Qui-Gon in your life, like Qui-Gon, who was like kind of against the Jedi way because the Jedi way was too narrow of a path, and Qui-Gon knew like you don't have to be that regimented. Like, enjoy life, baby. And if Anakin had Qui-Gon, so you're like Anakin with Qui-Gon.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, he had Obi-Wan. That was the next best thing. If he just listened to Obi-Wan, he would have been fine, I think.
Obi-Wan will be very upset. Broncos country will be very upset if they don't beat the Bills tonight, but we'll be there for you. He's Mace. Follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammy saying thanks for watching, everyone. OBT is a BFD, and we appreciate you. Stay tuned and stay frosty.